Welcome to Perspectives of a Dom and Sub. I'm Kez, a dominant.
And I'm Nami, a submissive.
And last week we discussed contracts, everything about them, how we utilize them.
And today we're going to be talking about training, the importance of training, different types of training, just everything you need to know to be well trained.
Yes, we have lots in store for today, but first we're going to tell you guys what we're smoking on. I will be smoking on this Pineapple Express sparkling gin. Can't focus. Terpsilate. Cute little crystals in here. And I'm going to take some dabs out of them.
Nice, nice. I'm smoking on flower, also from Plain Jane. I'm almost out of it. I gotta buy some more. But it is AVW1. It's some flour. I'm gonna put it in my bowl. Of course, my moon slabs. Yeah.
Yes, so yes. The amount of times we've been promoting Plain Jane, they need
I'm like, dang.
I mean, facts though. All right, cheers.
This is why we have water.
Water is love, water is life.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, we will talk about our DS updates. So stay tuned.
Okay. DS updates this week, which is nice.
Awesome.
Yes.
Ooh, let's hear it.
So I've been actually working on a different training this week. I don't know if I mentioned this before. Me and my boyfriend are long distance, so our trainings are a little different, which is fun because we're talking about DS. We're talking about trainings today, and I'm actually doing squirting training. So to teach myself how to squirt and all that jazz. We've done it before. Because I used to not know how to do it at all. Now I know how to do it, but we never actually did it as a full training. And now we're doing it as a full training, and it's pretty nice. So
How is that going? What is
it's it's nice. So what I did at first, I had to read a bunch of articles that he sent me about teaching yourself how to squirt, the relaxation, the position that you should be in, and all that. So the training I'm pretty much doing, which I'm gonna go more. I feel like I should go more deeper when we actually talk about training. But pretty much what I'm doing is doing a position, taking a photo of me in that position and sending to him, and I have to do it a certain amount of the days, and that's pretty much what that's is, and that's pretty much what we've been doing this week. So it's pretty nice. Any updates for you?
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I don't have that many DS updates because we haven't seen each other in a week because there's another COVID scare.
Oh. COVID.
Fucking COVID. But we have been doing porch time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was last week. So we haven't really played, done training. Training for about 2 weeks, but I did purchase some anal plugs for anal training because I know that's something that he wants to do and he doesn't know that I bought them yet. So it's going to be a cool surprise for him. I'm excited.
That is
See his
exciting.
face.
That's exciting. I actually haven't been able to have any play because of COVID, but I get it. I I
No.
haven't have in real life play because of COVID either in months. So I get it. I feel you.
Hope it is. Up next, we'll be discussing the topic of the week. So stay tuned. I don't remember what strain of distillate this is, isolate,
Mm-hmm.
but it's CBD. That's all you need to know.
Is it also plain Jane?
No, I actually got it from the dispensary.
Oh,
It's
nice.
not as nice as like the plain Jane ones, but I want to finish it, so so I can enjoy the plain Jane ones later. All right, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, cheers.
Ah.
So, the topic of the week is training. Very, very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I am actively doing right now, so I can talk so
Yeah.
much about training. Oh
Um,
my
I-
goodness. So I like training. What is it? So training is literally when the dom or the master or the top is teaching the submissive how they like things to be done. That could be certain behaviors, certain ways of talking to your dominant, talking to other people when you're in that DS dynamic, um, certain play that you both do together, and how you like that done, how you want that done, session protocols, which we'll kind of talk more about in a later episode of perspectives. What else? There's so many things to like train.
yeah. You can pretty much train. It's pretty much training your submissive to be what you want in this relationship, what you expect of them here in this relationship. And it's anything. It could be anything from mannerism, clothing, like what you wear, and it could be anything.
And it like training looks different in each relationship, and the training that you go through within one relationship you'll probably have to do training again in another relationship, unless if like the training that you've done before kind of coincides with what another dominant wants you to do, which is really easy. But for all the cases of my subs, I've had to train them basic stuff like address and like knowing how to dress, um, permission seeking, things like that are some basics that usually transfer over, but I usually just like to start from the bottom up.
What's the importance of training? At least for the submissive, the importance of training is we're learning how to better please our doms. We're learning, and that's why we're submissives. We want to please our dom, and training helps us do that perfectly. We if you don't do it correctly, you can have a punishment. So it teaches us how to do it perfectly for that dom. So that's the importance, at least for the submissive side. What's the importance for the doms?
Importance for the dom? how we want things to be done. Like, we love control, we want that control, and we want things to be done a certain way. And I'm going to teach you how to do things in a certain way. And if you deviate from that, then that leads to and that can lead to punishment, like you said before. Training gives structure to the relationship dynamic. So when you have a basic structure of how things are supposed to go, that leads to less anxiety, um, less questions about how you want stuff because you already know how to do it. And that gives more room for play, the actual things that you're in the relationship for. So, having training builds that structure, that foundation. So, when you do play, it's going to go smoothly. Yes.
So now subtypes of training. So we have oh
This is not my night, yo.
sorry, that was funny. So subtypes of trainings. We have 24/7 training. You have protocol training. You have
Service training. Did you say position training?
no, I did not. Position training.
If you're that kind of dom that likes when your sub has different positions for different things, there's like so many.
Yeah, I was like, and then it goes into like the very Pacific training. So it's like anal training. You can have is it delayed or when you controlled orgasm training. Like I'm doing some squirting training, and you can, like we said, you can train anything. Anything. So
Especially if you're both into the same play, then definitely be training on how you want that play to be done.
yes.
Yeah, that structure.
Structure. And if you're submissive, don't think because you've trained doing this with this person, this dom will be like, oh well, she trained with that dom. This dom might want something completely different, even if it's in the same category as your other dom. It's not a one size fits all thing.
Right, and you as a submissive may like find that you don't actually like doing things that way, and you want to change that up. That's when that negotiation and communication comes into play, because even if me as a dom, I want things a certain way, if my submissive is not comfortable with that, I have to listen to that. So
yeah, that's negotiation, communication, and remember consent. If it's something that you're not comfortable with, you don't consent to it. You say no, you compromise, you negotiate, you communicate, and you find out what fits both of you in your dynamics.
Absolutely. Like we stated in that episode, negotiation and communication is everything.
Yep, everything.
And how does someone do training? Ask your dominant.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ask your dominant. And like if your dom does not require training, ask for it. Because it's going to save a lot of arguments down the road, a lot of disagreements. Because you may have an idea of how something is supposed to go, and your dom can have an idea of how that thing is supposed to go, and it's not congruent. That can be a disaster if you're in session and you're trying to figure that out, and it's just not sexy anymore.
Like, now you're worried about the position, you're worried about doing it right. Everyone gets frustrated. Now you might as well just stop the scene and talk about how you want it run, and boom, training. Yes. So
how does one do training?
Yeah. How does one do training? How do you set up training with you and your submissive?
So
Our training period, we kind of like pre-calculated would be about 6 months. So that gives him ample time, especially if we're not meeting every week, to learn the things that I need him to learn, and to review it, to come back to it, start making that margin of error smaller and smaller and smaller. Correction, so corrective procedures. We we started with position training, and so we did like one or two positions at a time. I didn't want to throw like 8 to 10 of them at once because he would not forget that. As a dom, you do have to be responsible in that manner, so we focused on like one or two at a time, sometimes just one or two for 2 weeks, and every session we'll kind of review those, and then throw in another one, review that, and that would be throughout the session, even when we're playing. Um, so position training, and then we did behavior. So how I want him to act when we're here in private versus when we're out in public, and we're about to do. Well, I have planned a 24/7 training, so the types of things that I want him to do when we are in a 24/7 dynamic. Um, and our 24/7 dynamic would be like 1 to 3 days, and then after we're done with the training phase, then we'll kind of increase that to like 7 to 14 days. I don't know yet, but along that length. Body worship training. So like now we're getting to like the kink specific training, how I want to be worshipped in my body, how I want it to be served, like oral servitude, anal servitude, whatever along those lines are. That's how we're doing it. Task and organizational training, because he's also service submissive. So the tasks that I want him to do, I will like pop in every 2 minutes and see what he's doing, do some corrective measures, say like I want it to be this way. And I also like want to see what he does as an individual, because I don't want to take away that individuality, because that adds to the dynamic. So seeing what he's going to do and then put in some corrective measures to be more of what I want. Doing some organizational training, how I want things to be organized, labeled, sorted, things like that. Cleanliness, like the amount of clean I want something. Because one of our tests, I made him like clean all of my pieces, which was great. And he had to like go back and clean it again because it was just not up to par. So that kind of training, and that's like currently where we're at. And then we get to like the more kink specific, like orgasm denial, delay of orgasm, and that's when like the harsher punishments come in when it comes to orgasm, because that is his ultimate like reward.
Yeah.
It's reinforcement, and so that I have to be a little bit more strict on.
Nice.
Ooh,
So that is because I we're long distance right now. I do everything by myself in my room or via FaceTime. What happens is I have a calendar. Well, right now for squirting training, I have a calendar on like where I should be at a certain time, like a certain date, based on how we went through our body. He knows my body and what we read. I should be squirting at this amount of time. And if I don't, it's a punishment, but then of course, we just increase the time. But so far, it's what it is that I have to be I have to make sure I'm in the position that the article says it is, and I have to take a picture of that to make sure I'm in the right position. If not, I get a punishment. And then we correct it to make sure I am in the correct position to do that. I have to touch myself, make sure I am everything's going down right. I have to make sure I'm relaxing. I have to make sure that I'm not tensing up, because that's one of the things that the article says. Your body needs to be relaxed, and you can tell when a body is tense. So if I tense up, there's a reprimand. So that's with squirting training. Anal training was, I would have to take whatever size I was up to and leave it in for a certain amount of time. If I took it out too soon, it would have been a punishment. And that's through via FaceTime, so he's watching me do it that time, so he knows like how long he will do it on his watch, and he'll see how long I've been. He set a timer, and I have to stay to that timer. I can't go below the timer, and that's pretty much that. Yeah, so those are the two trainings we're doing right now, and that's pretty much what training looks like for us. It's mostly time based, position and pictures, and if you notice, I'm skipping out if I miss a day or do stuff like that. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
So, any like additional considerations with training?
Um, for subs, make sure that you're patient, like, and understand, like, do make sure you do your trainings even if you're a brat, because it helps you in the long run. Like, even though I'm a brat and I like to break rules and stuff, it's still better for me to do it most of the time. Make sure you're patient, make sure that it's something that you agree to, that you consent to, know your body. If it's something that you feel like you can't do, speak up.
This is your time to fuck up.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah. Moms, make sure that your training protocol is very clear and continuously check in with your sub. Like, how is this going? Do you need anything in addition, or do you want me to take anything away? Are you comfortable with this? Because you want that consent, our magic word. Have it written down somewhere that your sub can look back to if they forget anything that you've talked about or done together that's important for them to learn. Obviously, there are things that they need to be practicing and they need to be keeping up with, but making that also very accessible for your sub is just being a good dom. Yeah. Yes.
Good.
Yeah. All right. So next up we'll be answering some questions, but first we're gonna take another hit. I'm still gonna do CBD.
Oh, it must be so nice because it's already heated. You already know it's up to temp.
Yes.
Drop it in.
Temperature. I wanted it.
Cheers. How much time should you devote to training?
Question. Just like everything we will probably talk about in this podcast, it depends.
Yeah, it depends on where you are, like what kind of training is, where you are in that training. For some training, you might have some experience in, you just need to brush up on. So, of course, that would be a lower duration. It can be something you're doing brand new that could be a lot longer, and anywhere in between.
Yeah,
So, it
be something that you already learned that you have to unlearn and learn a different way how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And depends on how much you have to learn. So for my sub and why we're taking 6 months, it's because it's position training, it's address training, it's presentation, it's how you act in private versus how you act in public, 24/7 training. There's a plethora of different things that we're doing that's going to take 6 months.
Yeah. So it just depends on you and your dom's needs on how long it takes.
Absolutely. And that can change. It could end up being like, if you're aiming for 6 months, it could be 4 months, it could be 8 months.
Mhm.
It just depends.
That's why I feel like it's more important to set like goals or steps within the months than just to say this has to be done by a certain time. You hit a goal, then you're like, okay, so this is the next goal. Let's hit here, here, here. And then when it's all done, it's all done. Yeah.
And talk about if that's feasible for the
Mm-hmm.
life that you live.
Yep.
Next question. Do dominants need training too?
Do dominance need training?
I want to like know your perspective on this as a submissive.
Yeah, I think they do, just but it looks differently. It's not like a like how our training is. It's I feel like dom training is more happens with time and talking to their submissives. I feel like dom training happens during porch time, negotiations, because that's the time where the submissive is pretty much telling the dom what they okay with, what they're not okay with, how this affects them, how they like this, how they don't like this. So the dom is learning how to also please their submissives in these times. And it's not like a formal, like you need to learn how to do this. It's more of a talking and learning and adapting your um your your dominant role to fit the needs of your submissive.
Mhm. I think I absolutely agree with that. And I also think that it's important for DOMs to be aware of what things can be trained on, because I didn't know that I could do position training until like last year. And obviously, like I saw it like at different places, but I didn't know like it was a thing. And I became more aware of like the purposes of position training and the history behind position training and where it kind of originates, and the usefulness of position training and what kind of mindset that puts the sub in. And that's the kind of mindset I want them to be in. So just like doing your research on the different types of training that's out there and how you would facilitate that within your dynamic, and having that conversation with your sub and learning how to have that conversation and how to be like loose with training, giving that margin of error like we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good answer. Yeah. So the third question is training necessary for all submissives? I feel like this is going to be repetitive. It's honestly up to you and the dom. It's up to what type of dynamic you two have. I like training because I like to know exactly what my dom expects from me and them to correct if I'm doing something wrong. Some doms might not want trainings and they just want it to be corrected on the spot, and then that's it. You don't continuously do it over and over again. So it honestly depends on you and your dominance dynamic. Yeah.
It's necessary to be my submissive, you need training. I would recommend that all submissives should undergo some form of training just to make things smoother. Repeating again, building that foundation, building that structure. I personally think it's very important.
I also think it's important, but not everyone does it.
That's okay too.
Uh-huh.
And the fourth question is training static? I would say no. Just like everything, especially if you're negotiating and communication and communicating, it flows, it changes. You already grow as a person, your submissive is going to grow as a person, and what you like and what you don't like is going to change, especially if you are in a longer term, especially if you're in a DS dynamic, MS dynamic, you will change. So your training should be static too. Even if you have already gone through the training phase, you can then come to your submissive, or you as a sub can come to your dom. Hey, I really don't like how this is fitting anymore. Let's learn a different way of doing this. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not something that's set in stone. It's definitely something that continuously grows while you grow in your relationship, in your dynamic. It changes through person to person. It can also change if you're even staying in a long-term thingy and you add someone else. How does that training and things go? So it can literally it change. There's no way it can be set in stone. People, we all change too often for it to be that way.
Absolutely. And it's just not realistic for it to be static either. And if someone is trying to tell you like this is how it is and this is always how it's going to be, that's bullshit. That's a lie. Red flag.
Red flag. That's clearly they want a different type of control, not the good type.
And the fifth question is,
Does training only happen in a private setting? No. Like we said during the podcast, it can be your 24 training. It can be training to what you do when you have guests at your home, how you and it can be trained on how do you introduce yourself to your guest, how do you act while guests are there, where you are, where you sit while guests are there, what happens when you go to a restaurant, that's a sort of training, how you should dress while you're outside certain places. Like if you're going to a play party, how you act there. So a lot of training happens outside of the private of your like private of your home or between you two. It can also only deal with how you act with the public. So yeah.
Absolutely. So training can be anywhere. So that was all the questions that we had. Thank you for submitting those, and be sure to look out on our Instagram stories to submit any other questions that you may have, and we'll answer them next week. Our topic is going to be punishment versus abuse. So any questions surrounding that topic, please feel free to ask those. And so next up we'll be closing out.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Stuck.
Yeah, boy. So this was our 5th episode of Perspectives of a Dom and Sub.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast.
Yes, it's been a pleasure talking about training and answering all of your questions.
Let's do our last toke of the day.
Toke. I'm talking on the same thing, so I don't need to introduce that. All right, cheers.
Oh.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you next week.